I changed a number of entity names within the model. So the first thing I want to do is rename the navigation properties that are now out of sync with entity names. And I need to make sure that I maintain consistent singular and plural names. All right, so here in the customer entity, I'm going to widen this a bit so you can see the complete navigation properties down here at the bottom. I need to change sales order headers to orders, because that's a navigation property to what is now called the order table. It's no longer called sales order header. All right, then in the order entity, I need to change sales order details to line items. And again, I need to maintain the consistent pluralization. Okay, because again, change that entity name to line item. In line item, I also need to change the navigation property to the parent object from sales order header to just order. And in this case, because a line item has just a single order that's associated with, that's singular. All right, let's go down to the product table now. Where'd it go? There it is. And the first thing I need to do is change product category to just category, again to reflect the changed table name. I also need to change product model to just model. And then change sales order details to line items. And then over here in the model entity, I need to change product model product descriptions to just model descriptions. And then over here in model description, it's now called just description. Change that, and it's now just called model. Okay, then finally, here in the description table, I need to change this unwieldy name to just model descriptions. Get rid of all those redundant product names. Okay, so that's a first go at cleaning up the navigation properties. Again, just to account for the fact that I changed some of the entity names. And so now, once again, those names are consistent with the names of the related entities. Okay, but there's a common problem that you'll need to deal with for navigation properties. And that's the case where there are multiple relationships between one table in the database and another table. This confuses the wizard, so it creates less than useful navigation property names. So for example, let me go back up to the order table. And as you can see, the entity includes address and address1 navigation properties. This arises because an order can have a ship to address and a bill to address. So that's the reason for the two associations between the order and the address entities. So again, because the wizard didn't understand those relationships, it just gave the properties numbered names based on the related entity name, in this case, address. So clearly, these need to have better names, because you can imagine from an application, if I'm referencing the address object for ship to, do I use address or address1? There's really no way to know. And unfortunately, the answer isn't terribly obvious within the model itself. Okay, so the way to figure out which navigation property is which is to look at the properties for each and the association that each is bound to. Sometimes you luck out and the association name, which is based on the relationship name in the database, tells you what you need to know. If it doesn't, then you have to look at the properties of the association to figure it out. Fortunately, relationships in AdventureWorks LT have sane names. All right, so let's take a look at the address property here and look at its properties. So if I hover over this, you can see that the association name, and again, this is something that was picked up from the name of the relationship in the database, is FK for foreign key, sales order header, address, bill to, woohoo, we lucked out, address ID. Okay, so this property, address, is the bill to address association. And then if I do the same thing for address 1 and come back over here to properties, you can see that it says ship to. All right, so we lucked out and we know how to change the names of those two navigation properties. So I'm going to change address to bill to address. And I'm going to change address 1 to ship to address. Okay, so now within the application, I know exactly which navigation property to use. Okay, but we still have to deal with the other end of the association. And that's here within the address entity. So I'm going to widen this a bit so you can see the full name. We have the same sort of situation, sales order headers and sales order headers 1. So first of all, one of the problems we have here is that the entity is no longer called sales order headers, so we want to change that anyway. But which navigation property applies to the bill to and ship to address? Okay, it's not obvious, and it wouldn't be obvious within the application. Okay, but the good news is that the drill is the same. So I'll select sales order headers, come over here to properties, and once again, that name is within that association. So I know that sales order headers is the bill to address. Same thing with sales order headers 1, over into properties, and it's the ship to address. Okay, now these are the same association names. This is just the other end of the same association that I was dealing with when I was working with these navigation properties. So these association names, again, that were picked up from the database, have the same name. Okay, so sales order headers 1, again, is the ship to. So I'm going to change this to ship to orders. And this one to bill to orders. Okay, I'll save my changes. If the associations weren't named with sane names, whoops, modified outside, oh, sure, because I saved the model. And I have that file open, so that's why it was prompting me that. Okay, so another problem is self-joins. This is the case where a relationship is defined to relate one row of data to another row in the same table, sometimes called a self-association. So the category table has that issue. All right, so here's the category entity, and that's what a self-join looks like. All right, and notice that we have a product category 1 and product category 2 navigation properties. So these are the self-joins. Again, the wizard just couldn't figure out what to make of that self-join, and so it just gave the properties the name of the entity 1 and 2. Not terribly useful, but at least the properties are there. Okay, so let's take a look at the association for product category 1. So it's FK product category, parent product category ID, product category ID. Well, that's not really useful. Let's take a look at product category 2 and the properties. FK product category, parent product category ID, product category ID. It's the same association. Okay, so that technique is not useful. So this just doesn't tell anything useful about which is the parent and which is the child navigation property. But we do have a clue in the multiplicity of each property. So once again, select product category 1 and go to properties. And you can see that this is the many side of the relationship. And Look here, this is the single, 0 or 1 side of the relationship. Okay, so that gives a clue right there, but it actually turns out to be a little bit easier to look at the properties of the association itself. So I've selected it there, so you can see this is the really long name of that association, because this shows the N1 and N2 multiplicity in a single properties window. So it's a little bit easier to see that product category 1 is associated with the 0 to 1 multiplicity, and product category 2 is associated with the many multiplicity. Okay, so the parent in the relationship is the 0-1 multiplicity, and the child is the many side. So we have enough information to change these names. Okay, but there's actually a couple more clues. So if we go back here to product category 1, notice that the return type is a collection of category. So this is going to refer to multiple items, which means that this is going to be the children. And if I look at product category 2, its return type is an instant of category. And so that references the parent. Okay, so we finally have enough information. I'm going to change product category 1 to child categories. And product category 2 to parent category, because it's singular. Category. Spelling it right always helps. Okay, once again, to look at the property for that, it's going to retrieve an instance. I expect to retrieve only one parent, so parent category is correct. And if we look at child categories, same sort of thing. It's going to return a collection, so it's going to return multiple things. That's the children, and so it should be plural.